Welcome to NEK VT Rocks. My guest today is Effie Brown. Effie, you're a lifer, a Vermont lifer. You're probably one of the few that are in your circle right now. But you grew up here, right?
I did.
Where? In Newport?
Derby.
Derby,
Yes. I grew up on a dairy farm and was my grandparents bought this farm in 1904. My dad was one of 15 children.
Wow.
Born to my grandmother. My grandfather brought three other siblings from his first marriage into that marriage. And so there was a total of 18 children, but two of them died as infants. So anyway, my dad was the youngest of the 15 born to my grandmother and grandfather, and he never left the farm.
Uh-huh.
And I now am on that farm.
That's the same farm?
Same farm.
Wow.
Yeah. When I married after high school, my husband and I bought a dairy farm, which is at Eagle Point, at the T in the road at Eagle Point, was our farm. So I've lived on one side of Lake Memphremagog or the other.
Right.
It seems that all of the properties that I've owned or lived in either had a view or were actually on Lake Memphremagog. I brought this this book, Beautiful Waters, along because it's history. This is volume 2 of Beautiful Waters, Lake Memphremagog. It's a history written back in the 1930s, and it's a most interesting book. The author is William Bullock is his name, and he talks about the many changes that happened around Lake Memphremagog, as in what different towns are comprised of or were comprised of, and then they split off, and Newport became Newport City, and Derby eventually became Derby. But
Right.
It's an extremely interesting history anyway of
Yeah,
the
I've
lake.
never seen that book before. There's several that are more recent, but that one's new to me. I have to look that one up.
Yeah, it's this lake. I remember as a child, my first memories were of because we were in between Lindsay Beach Road and Cousins Beach Road. We actually, and because we had adjoining properties to those properties, we had permission to swim either place.
Nice.
And I remember going to the Cousins Beach as a young child and swimming there. My brothers were 6 years and 9 years older than myself. I also remember my dad was a builder of wooden rowboats, and to supplement the income, he would build, I don't know, 1 or 2 boats, I think, a season, and take them down. There's a stream, a brook, actually. The mouth of the brook comes out in between Cousins Beach and Lindsay Beach, and he would take them down there and and chain them and let them soak so that they didn't leak.
Right.
It swelled the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Lindsay Beach was a public beach when I was a child. And there was a little snack bar there. Alice Lindsay was the owner. I never knew her husband, but I think he's talked about in here. And so I took swimming lessons.
Yeah.
The bus would come out of Newport full of Newport kids, and Derby and Newport kids didn't really know each other unless they lived in town.
Right.
And I didn't. I was rural, and so scared me to get on the bus with these Newport kids. And I was probably 9, 10 years old at that point. But the water, to me, it seemed clean, unless we'd had a storm, which would push, floating material into the shore. But you could see the bottom. It was just a really nice swimming lake.
So the changes that you see now must be mind-blowing.
Yes, many changes. In fact, my dad was a fisherman besides a boat builder, of course.
And a farmer.
Yes, and a farmer. But in the leisure time, maybe in the evening after the chores were done, we would go out in the rowboat off from Cousins Beach and fish and catch perch. And they were so good. Take them home, and my dad knew how to clean them, so there was only that center bone. There were no little bones.
Right.
And my mom would fry them up in the frying pan, and I thought, wow, these are really good.
This is how to live, you thought.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good feast of, and every once in a while in the winter, someone would drop off a bucket full of smelt, and they were pretty yummy too.
Yeah.
But with the changes that have come about, as an adult, I started going to Seymour Lake, which was much cleaner, and that was where I decided if I were swimming, that's where I would swim, and I'm very sad to say I haven't been swimming in Memphremagog for a number of years now, and I also would not eat the fish from Memphremagog. It saddens me to think that the water has become contaminated.
Right.
It's very sad. My connection is through generations. My grandparents knew Alice Lindsay, and, well, there was a little. Supposedly, my grandfather thought she was quite pretty. And she was. I think my grandmother was a little jealous of her.
Yeah.
Woman who owned a beach, lakefront property. But, and she was widowed, I believe. But, so anyway, that's just a little family ha-ha. Now that my grandparents are long gone, we can talk about it. But yeah, things have changed. And I think the change started to happen with the wastewater treatment facility being very close to the lake on the Clyde River.
Yes.
I'm not sure how many feet it is from the lake, but it's not many. And
that was a landfill before then, which is also insane.
About landfills.
Yeah, let's talk about landfills.
It seemed wherever a town could find a body of water was where they wanted to put their garbage. And yes, the the landfill was there. I very vaguely remember that, but I do obviously remember Coventry Road's garbage dump.
Right.
It wasn't a landfill, it was a dump, because I think what they did basically was the garbage got dumped and they just pushed it into the water.
Right.
And you know, it's
we've got the end result of that, and so does the land across the street from there.
Yeah.
You sort of think, how on earth did this happen? Where were people's eyes? Clearly not there.
No.
How did it get to where it is now? I mean, how have we gone from a little dump to that monstrosity?
It's in my way of thinking, it tinges on a crime. I mean, a crime has been committed to allow that to happen, and I don't know if the community, the people in the community, had any say in the closing of these facilities that were utilized. Farmers had their own dump.
Right.
I understand towns and cities needed some place for their garbage, and they were either located on a knoll so they could push the garbage over the hill.
Yes, really scientific, isn't it?
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened in Vermont. Out of sight, out of mind. But we, Northeast Kingdom residents, have taken the...
We're where the dump stops,
Yes.
where the garbage stops.
Yes. Yes. It's... It really saddens me because I come from generations of appreciation of this lake. And people, I think they just did not recognize that we need to be thinking down the road to our children, their children, and their children,
Right.
generations, and what will become. I'm concerned about air and clean water, clean air and clean water, and now I'm very concerned about soil.
Right, it's contaminated, we know that.
It's,
But how do we begin to get enough awareness to start stopping it? Because we know that our state organizations who control this, unless they get an enormous amount of pressure from those of us who are living this, are not going to change it. As we've just experienced with the last hearing we had here, where in effect we were blown off.
we were.
You wrote a very passionate letter about that, a beautiful letter, which certainly raised your credentials as an activist, a water activist, an advocate.
My heart is in nature. Our natural resources are not expendable. There will not be more.
Right.
There will not be more unless we can raise awareness, speak about it.
And stop what we're doing.
Stop contamination.
Yeah.
I will say I've been involved with a group named DUMP, Don't Undermine Memphremagog's Purity, because of what I see as a child. The purity that was in the water has disintegrated, and so I became interested because it seemed that the goal was to stop the expansion of the landfill in Coventry.
Right.
And I feel as though our neighbors, meaning Newport, Coventry, have been willing, because of money seen,
Right.
to take more and more and more. If I think if Newport were under an administration that was considerate of the environment, had the same passion and love that I do for what we have here, I think they would be more cautious of further pollution.
Right.
And I believed before I got involved and started working with this environmental group, DUMP, I believed that our Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation, I believe they were here to protect our natural resources.
They're not.
I found out that no, that's not the case, and
It's very disturbing.
it is very disturbing. I am not only are the waters of Memphremagog, especially South Bay, highly disturbed, I am highly disturbed also.
Right.
Because at this point we're looking at the possibility, if the people don't rally and speak out, there's a possibility of further contamination of this lake, this drinking water reservoir. That I keep thinking of it as I could be drawing that water had I not been fortunate to have a spring uphill.
Yes.
On my property. I could be drawing my water for bathing, for drinking out of Memphremagog.
And feeding your animals.
Watering my garden.
Yes. Which then contaminates what you're growing.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, we're very short-sighted as a species.
We are. Well, I would say some are. Some are raising consciousness.
Yes. It's a very hard process.
It is.
Chipping away.
Yes, I understand now why teachers get frustrated because it's repetition.
Yes.
You might, out of a room full of students, I suppose you may entertain the mentality of one or two a day, but you don't reach them all the time, and it's the same thing with the public. It's just constant reiteration.
Right. Because not only are we discharging effluent from our wastewater treatment into the lake, we know that there's seepage from the landfill.
Right.
And if the proposed changes at the landfill happen, then there's a real likelihood that all of that leachate could go into the lake. And we own a 5-mile pond, basically. That's Vermont. But the other 20-something miles are in Canada. And to be sending that up, and it is a reservoir for Sherbrooke. We're crazy doing that. It's as though we don't sort of see beyond the end of our 5-mile pond. But if we're damaging our pond, then we can't use it either.
Exactly. And I really put that responsibility on the state.
Yes.
They have the ability, whether they have to rewrite some regs or what they have to do. I mean, they need to update some things that are way outdated, and I understand there's a hurry and a need, they believe, to filter contaminants out of the leachate. I think they're not waiting for the science to develop to the point where possibly they could do that. And it seems that at this point there are funds coming from the feds for resources for many different projects in the state, and having clean water seems to be essential to me.
You would think.
Yeah.
You would think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that they think.
To me, it's part of infrastructure.
Right.
The wastewater treatment facilities are part of infrastructure, and
But citing a landfill on the shores of a lake right in the wetlands, and it's the only landfill in the state, isn't smart thinking.
it's crazy.
It really is.
It's crazy thinking.
Yeah.
Insane thinking. There has to be, until the nation, the world figures out the best way to deal with garbage, with trash.
Well, burying it's not the solution. That is so 19th century. Welcome to the 21st century.
Right.
And we've learned nothing. Insane.
Exactly. I think.
Do you think it would make a difference if a lot of people in the area pressured the city councils or select boards and then the state? I think that would make a dent.
The first meeting that I attended at the Gateway in September of 2018, I believe.
Yeah.
That first meeting was extremely well attended, and that's a meeting that was called by someone who lived in Orleans County. Henry Coe lived in Orleans County, farmed in Orleans County, has property in Orleans County, children and grandchildren in Orleans County. And that meeting was very well put together.
It was.
And then we also, with our Canadian neighbors, we had another meeting at the Hubbard building here in Newport, and that was very well attended by the Canadian, the mayors of the towns around the lake, some of the, I'm not sure if any of their federal people, but their local legislators
They
came, and then the pandemic hits. So I think we've had a bit of a roadblock set in the way. I do believe that we, once people are not afraid of catching COVID, I believe that we could probably draw a number of people together, whether we need to move to from Newport. I think we'll probably having a larger group, and yes, putting pressure on the so-called administration here in Newport.
Right.
I think you can't block out 100 voices.
No.
Forever. You can try, but in the end, I believe the right thing will be done. I don't see the way.
Right.
It's not in my vision, but I have a belief.
At some point it will happen.
It will happen. And I believe it will happen even if we have to go to Montpelier and carry signs.
I like that idea.
At the Capitol.
Yes.
And give the governor and that administration the idea that we're serious.
Yes. Yeah.
Enough is enough.
It really is.
Would you pollute your neighbor's well? Would you pollute their spring?
I would hope not. And actually, that's a criminal offence if you do, and it's considered an act of war if you do it to another country, according to the Geneva Convention. That is pretty serious talk.
Very serious.
You sort of wonder, I mean, nobody at this point can deny that there's climate change. There's certainly some pretty intense weather activity.
Right.
The lake, the level of the lake is controlled by a dam, and that's up in Magog. It's part of the hydroelectric system, I believe. If a weather event takes out that, and then there's no control over the level, Newport could really have a problem. And so would the dump, the landfill, which is why building right on a body of water is so crazy.
Yeah, I think about
Tropical Storm Irene.
I think about the Clyde River Dam.
Yes, which had a problem just a few months ago.
Newport could be gone.
Yes, it could.
In a severe weather event.
Yes.
That dam could easily overflow, and I'm assuming they're still making power with that dam also. Yeah.
There was some problem this summer that happened there. Something broke, and there was a massive amount of a wall of brown water that just came down and into the lake, and you could see it as a long line across the lake. Yeah, I mean, I'm crazy enough to still swim in the lake. Probably that's called denial. But it's so convenient.
Well, yes.
And it's such a beautiful lake.
It is. It is.
To think of us risking that. Part of the current tourist attraction move from the city of Newport is to say, look to the lake. Well, yes, I love the idea of looking to the lake, but what are we doing? Do we really want to look to the lake and risk it? Are we crazy? Apparently so.
I believe that Lake Medford-Magog is one of the base structures of the economy of the Newport area, and they've done some nice work with the walking path.
Yeah, it's lovely.
That is a huge plus. I know people who camp there at Prouty.
Yeah.
They carry the word back to their friends and families from wherever they come, and you know, they're going to promote the lake, and we must have clean water.
Right.
If we can further clean what we have and stop any further pollution of the lake, we must.
Do your friends who camp there understand the risks to the lake right now?
I don't.
There's your next education project.
Actually, I did end up having a barn sale. I did have a family stop by that actually owned property on the lake, and they were very interested in what the efforts are.
Good.
Yes, and I believe they're from Texas. And one of the properties that I owned and lived in was actually on the bluff. And it was part of the old Camp Elizabeth, talking about the recreation. I mean, that area has always been a recreational. There used to be a bowling alley there. I remember going in that as a child. I was told, and I don't remember seeing this, there was a slide from that bluff down into the lake.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, and I think they must have, I don't know whether they pumped water up so that they had water on the slide, but it was It was a long,
That
it was a
would be
big
great.
slide.
Oh, I'm sorry that's not still there.
Yeah. I haven't gotten into, I just pulled this out yesterday out of my parents' bookshelf, and I hadn't read it. Like I said, I was a slow reader, but I did find a website that I could start listening to it. And I'm not sure if it talks about the old Camp Elizabeth, but that was quite the resort. And then I think it became a boys' camp at one point. I'm not sure if it was a girls' camp at one point, but I know it was a boys' camp. They had, even when I owned the property, there were still small cabins there that were used for the camp. And and then the developer came in.
Right.
And started cutting down all the big trees that were there. And I was part of the efforts
To stop
to
that.
stop that. Yes.
Have you been there recently?
I was down on the walking path there. No.
You need to go take a look. You're not going to like it, but you need to go take a look.
Yeah. Actually, I did stop by the camp that it was Camp Bonhomme, the camp that I owned, and I did stop by there to meet the owner, the current owner, and talked with him for a little bit. And he told me there's someone with beaucoup bucks who's building a
mansion
there.
Yeah. It's worth taking a look.
Yeah.
We unfortunately are out of time.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, because it's so nice to get the historical perspective as well as everything else, and hopefully this reaches people, and that we can all start to look at the lake as something to be valued, not to be exploited and abused, and that we can start to live our lives differently again.
Absolutely.